Hi friends, and welcome to this week's episode of The In-Between. It's spring, and I'm so excited that the weather is getting warmer and the days are a little bit longer. I'm continuing this month by focusing on self-care, and today it's just me talking to you about why I think you really need to begin to incorporate a Sabbath into your life. I'm not going to lie, I get a little bit preachy in this, but it's just because this practice has absolutely revolutionized my life. It's a shorter one, so sit back, receive all that you can, and I pray that this week you find a little bit of time to take care of your soul. Hi, you guys. It's just me once again, and I'm really excited about today's podcast because I just want to talk to you out of my heart. I've kind of said that this month of March, I'm focusing on taking care of our souls. And previously, I talked a little bit about the practice of Lent and how I think if we add some disciplines to our faith walk, that can help. Had another podcast with a friend talking about nutrition and taking care of our bodies, because I think our bodies are so intricately connected to our souls. And today, I want to talk about one more practice I've added to my life that's become a real discipline, not in the sense that it's hard, in the sense that I make sure that it happens every single week if I can, because it literally has become a life source to me. And that is a Sabbath. Probably most of you are aware of the Sabbath, and when you think of it, maybe you think about the Ten Commandments, because one of the 10 Commandments is that we should honor and remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. And so obviously it was something that was really important to God. But I think over the years, and especially because our world is just so crazy, that a lot of times we ignore it, or we think, I don't have time for that. Or instead of taking a true Sabbath, you think, you know what, I'll take a 2-hour nap and I'll get rest that way. And so I just want to talk a little bit about that, about a Sabbath and how it can absolutely revolutionize your life. I think this is a Eugene Peterson quote. He says this. He says, "We commit a daring act of faith when we honor the Sabbath. One of the most courageous things you can do is to do nothing." I know that's true in my own life. Sometimes the scariest thing in my life is to think, you know what, I'm going to lay myself down because I can't do anything else. I can't control this situation, or maybe I can keep doing things. I can keep controlling things, but my body, my soul, my mind needs to rest. And so I'm going to lay myself down and trust that God has got this. So I'm basically going to do a quick little mini sermon on the Sabbath and 3 things why I think it's so important to add it to your life. First reason is because it realigns us with God. Basically, it reminds us He is in charge. And if you have not been allowing Him to be in full control and in charge of your life, literally take an entire day each week, realigns yourself back to that place. It's so good to come to a place where you realize I am not enough in and of my own strength. Because when we come to that place of realizing I'm not enough, we are reminded, of course you're not. He is. I've been reading this book by Jenny Allen this month. The light's not great there. Nothing to prove. And probably my favorite quote so far of the whole book is this: "It's not my curse that I believe I am not enough. It's my sin that I keep trying to be." Let me say that again. It's not my curse that I believe I am not enough. It's my sin that I keep trying to be. And I think maybe that's why this whole concept of God making the Sabbath literally one of the 10 Commandments is for this very reason, is if we do not force ourselves to stop, then we can begin to literally live in a place, in a habit of sin, believing that the world is on our shoulders. And so when we stop and we acknowledge God, it reminds us of who we really are and of the greatness of who He is. You know, it realigns us in the sense, too, that we remember, I preached on this the other day, that we are called to walk with God, to live with God, to work with God, not to do all those things for God. It's just the slight change of one word. But when we really grasp that understanding and that becomes true revelation in our hearts, it can change everything. We need to stop and think about that for a second. You were called to walk with God, not to do a bunch of work for him. And when we stop, when we rest, we are reminded of that truth and that fact. The second reason Sabbath is so amazing and important is because it literally refreshes our souls. It refreshes our souls. God created Adam. He has the 6 days of creation. And then it says, after he creates Adam, right after that, then the 7th day he rests. And Adam's very first day, basically God creates him at the end of the day. And isn't it interesting that Adam's day then begins with rest? I think that's why within the Jewish culture, when they celebrate Sabbath, it starts on a Friday night. It starts with a dinner. And literally, they start the Sabbath with a time of dinner, sleep, true resting, and then the rest of their day. And I think God created man to realize how much we need rest. Like, rest should be the first thing that we go to, because it's the rest that refreshes us and fuels us for what we have ahead of us. I read a wonderful book called The Rest of God by Mark Buchanan. And listen to this. I think this is so good. I'm going to read it here off my iPad. He was talking about in Exodus chapter 23, verse 12, that says this: 6 days you shall do your work, but on the 7th day you shall rest, that your ox and your donkey may have rest, and the son of your servant woman and the alien may be refreshed. So the reason that on the 7th day we rest is so that we can be refreshed. Well, what I loved in his book was he took that word refreshed, he looked at the original Hebrew. That word there is translated, refresh, is translated as nefesh or napis, which is literally where we get our word nap from. A nap should bring you refreshment. But that same Hebrew word, that like the origins of that word also refer to our inmost self, our deepest soul, basically our true identity. And so he says this, when we are refreshed in our true soul, our real self. Because I don't know if you're like me, but there have been times in my life where I am exhausted. And so I try to, maybe I get away and take a little vacation, or I try to take a nap. But sometimes you can rest, but if you're not really Sabbathing, if you're not really connecting with the Lord, maybe you've gotten a little bit more sleep, but you're not actually refreshed, like your soul is still just running and, just tangled up and all of this stuff. And that word nefesh, the Hebrew word, it literally means to breathe. And which is so fascinating, because all of this is in correlation to, it begins right after God literally breathes into Adam. And so Sabbath is for nefesh. It is for refreshment. It is for breathing in the breath of God. It is for literally bringing a fresh wind to our true souls, to our innermost being. It's not just a collapse and weariness. It's not just to kind of give God a token day. It is absolutely to refresh our souls. One of my favorite stories about kind of this whole concept was told by Robert Morrison in a sermon of his. And he basically kind of had a moment where he broke down. He said he was in his closet trying to choose what socks to wear that day. And he literally could not choose what socks. I don't know. Have you ever been in that place before? I know there have been a couple of times in my life where I've gotten in the shower and I just start crying. And I have no idea why I'm crying. I'm crying because my soul is exhausted and I think I can't do anything else. And that's where he was. He was trying to choose socks for that day. And he just couldn't. And he realized that he had to just kind of take an indefinite sabbatical. And he had the ability to do that with his job and with his work at the church. And when he started, everyone kind of said, okay, how long is this going to be? And he said, I don't know. I don't know how long. And he said, I really went into it, Lord, I just need you to refresh my soul. I don't know how long it's going to be. And every day he would wake up kind of asking the Lord, okay, are we done? Am I refreshed? And he said it was on day 53 that all of a sudden he realized he was refreshed. And he stopped and he started talking to the Lord about it. And the Lord said, you know what? You didn't take a Sabbath once all last year. You stole 52 days from me. And it took 52 days to get your soul back where it needs to be. Now, I don't think most of us are maybe in that place where we even have the liberty to take 52 days. I don't know if we realize that we literally are stealing from God when we don't take a day to rest. We're stealing from him his desire in that day to breathe fresh life into our souls. If you are bone tired and you are searching for something to bring refreshment to your soul, I honestly don't know if there's anything quite like a Sabbath. Learning every single week to take an entire day to rest and to refresh your soul. It's so powerful. And the third thing that happens when we Sabbath is it reminds us of our purpose. It reminds us who we really are. I love to tell people this story. Several years ago, before we even had kids, my husband and I, Josh, and my dad, we were all in the nation of Thailand doing some conferences and some missionary work. And we had our final day. It was a day off. We were in the city of Bangkok. We had been doing some tourist kind of stuff, seeing the palace. And I'll never forget, we were in this major tourist place. There weren't a ton of Americans around. And all of a sudden, this guy stops and he starts to scream towards our direction, Andy Roddick, everyone, it's Andy Roddick. And we're kind of looking around and we realize he's pointing at us. And my husband says, what, me? And he says, yes, it's Andy Roddick. Now, my husband, I don't think he looks anything like Andy Roddick, but apparently that's what he thought. And my dad, who didn't like skip a beat, he looked at the guy and he said, if you think he's Andy Roddick, who am I? And the guy, I loved it. He said, Colonel Sanders, KFC. Now, if you've never seen my father, I'm going to have to put a little picture. I'll see if I can put a picture up. Because he does absolutely looks like Colonel Sanders. He's got the white goatee, wears the glasses, the whole 9 yards. Thankfully, he doesn't dress like Colonel Sanders. But it was a funny story. And I told someone that story one day, and I don't even know why God brought this story to my mind as I was even thinking about this, of reminding us of who we are and who our purpose is. And obviously, my dad knows who he is. But sometimes I think we forget who we really are, and maybe we get, a glimpse of who people think we could be or who we should be. And how ridiculous would it be had my dad come back from Thailand and said, you know what? I'm going to quit pastoring my church. I'm going to start making chicken. I mean, ridiculous, right? Why? Because he's not Colonel Sanders. He looks like Colonel Sanders, but he is not Colonel Sanders. And it kind of goes back to my first point of this. I think sometimes we live our life knowing that as Christians, we are called to be like God. We are every day being formed into the image of Christ, but we are not God. We are not Jesus. We are to be like him, to begin to walk in his ways. But there is a line, and it is actually a quite large line, between being like God, growing in his ways, and all of a sudden believing this myth that we are God. Now, probably all of us would say, I don't believe I'm God, but are you living like it? God has so convicted me that there are times in my life where I wouldn't say it consciously, but subconsciously, I'm living my life like I am the God of my life, and I've got everything under control, and I'm going to do things the way I want to do them. And taking a day of rest, what it does is literally we stop, we rest, and we remember that God is God, and I am not. I am not all powerful. I am not all knowing. I am not present everywhere. And it is in that place of rest where we gain trust in him that we are reminded of our purpose. and we grow more and more to become like him in his character. We grow in grace. We grow in patience. We grow in mercy. We grow in goodness. And, that's so important to be reminded of who we really are. It goes back even to that Jenny Allen quote. We are reminded we are not enough, but we serve a God who is. So if you need Sabbath in your life, probably a lot of you out there do. Here's a couple of practical thoughts. The first one is stop. You have to have the ability and the willingness to say, you know what, I am going to stop. And here, let me tell you this. You don't stop because you're finished. You will never be finished with your to-do list. Isn't that true? Look, I started this to-do list yesterday. I'm probably never going to finish that. I'm definitely not going to finish it today. So you don't stop because you finish something. You don't stop because you're finally ready to stop. You don't stop because you've made all the phone calls, you finished your project, you got through your stack of emails. You don't stop. There's no time to stop. You just choose that every week I'm going to stop. So you've got to make a decision. And then the second practical thing is personalize it. I think for a while we so pushed Sabbath away because we saw Jesus come onto the scene, and a lot of what he did even when he was on the scene was he debunked some of the way Sabbath was being celebrated at that time. But he didn't do away with Sabbath, Instead, what he did was he said, hey, you guys, all of you Pharisees, you've made Sabbath about all of these rules, not even just rules that God gave, but rules upon rules upon rules that men began to put on the people. And he brought people back to the heart of the commands of God. And the heart of God's command for Sabbath is to stop and rest and to remember him. And so that can look like a lot of different things to different people. You don't have to worry about getting legalistic or anything like that, but you just find a way to make it for yourself. So what I mean by that is, what day is a good day for you? For me, it's not Sundays. I work at a church. So Sunday is a work day for me. So my Sabbath really isn't Sundays. But for a lot of people, Sunday is a great day. Start your day off by church, remembering God, putting him first. And then you just set aside the rest of your day. You know what? I am going to rest. I think the other really important thing is, like we talked about, the Sabbath is to refresh your soul. And so one way you personalize it is you literally define what refreshes your soul. What's good for you? I have friends, and what's good for them is to be outside in nature. So maybe once a month on your Sabbath, you need to go out for a hike. Or maybe every week you need to go do something outside. Go for a bike ride, go for a walk, go for a run. Maybe refreshment for your soul is playing with your kids. Maybe it's taking a nap. I feel like I kind of bashed napping earlier. I have no problem with napping. So maybe you put a nap into there. Maybe you still do stuff that you need to do. Maybe you still go to birthday parties and, answer phone calls. But the point is this, is that there is a mindset that I am just choosing to not strive, to not hustle, to not go after all of the things. So what does refreshment look like for you? I think it's important that we connect with God on the Sabbath and we connect with people. Maybe occasionally you need to be by yourself, but I love that a Jewish Sabbath begins with a family meal, because a lot of times our souls are refreshed by the people who know us best. And we just spend quality time with them, laughing and having fun. When is the last time you sat down and you didn't scruff your food, but you sat down and you just laughed and you had a great conversation? That brings refreshment to your soul. And the last practical thing is literally, I'm going to say it this way, focus on your breathing. When I was in labor with my first kid, Selah, my husband, I think he thought it was funny, but as contractions were kind of really starting to ramp up just a little bit, started to sing Faith Hill's song, Just Breathe, to me. It was not good. I'm pretty sure I gave him a death stare, and thankfully my mom and sisters were like, no, that is not going to work. But the point is this, is when I was in labor, I had to first be really intentional about breathing. And then once you get in the habit of it, then you don't have to be quite so intentional. You still have to be mindful of it, but you don't have to be quite so intentional. And so the point is this, is initially, if you make a decision to incorporate having Sabbath every week in your life, initially, you're going to have to be super intentional. Like, you probably need to write it in on your schedule. You need to talk to your family. You need to even let, I have my assistant, Dawn, who works for me. She had to let me know, hey, Paige, Fridays are my Sabbath. We don't work on Fridays. And so I'm so glad she said that to me, because I try to make it a big point that I never text her, I never email her, I never call her about anything work-related on Fridays. Why? Because she's been intentional. She's let me know it's her Sabbath, and I want to honor that. And she's honoring it by letting people know. So you have to be intentional. But can I tell you something? After a few weeks of you being intentional and really making this a part of your life, it's going to feel like breathing for you. If you miss one, you are going to miss it, because it is so good for your soul. Let me close with this little story. I read this one time in a book, and it's so just kind of got me. It says this, I'm going to read it off from my iPad. There was a mother whose son was hyperactive and attention deficit. She tried everything to change him, to calm him, drugs, therapy, discipline, and it all failed. Finally, in utter desperation, she grabbed him one day in the mayhem of one of his eruptions and held him in a tight and loving embrace, singing, speaking words of consolation and affection to him, pressing his head to her chest and rocking him. He thrashed, twisted, squirmed, and then quieted, and he rested in her arms. And when she set him down, he was changed. Now, every time he trips out, that's what she does. And someone asked her one time, they said, why do you do that? Why, whenever he kind of has a temper tantrum or just a moment of kind of spiraling out of control, why is it that you grab him, you hold him close, you rock him, and you speak words of life and truth until he finally calms down? And she said this, I do it long enough for him to remember who he is. And you know what? I think that's a picture of the Sabbath. Sabbath is this. It's God holding you long enough that you remember who you are. You are His. You are not God. He's creating you to be more and more like His Son. But you are His. And so today, this week, if you get honest, maybe internally, maybe externally you look like you're cool and calm, but maybe internally you are thrashing about. You are in mayhem and you feel like your life is erupting and spinning out of control. Can I tell you, you have a loving God with open arms who is so ready literally to come and to embrace you, to hold you until your soul is refreshed. Because what He wants to do more than anything else is He wants you to remember who you really are. You are His. So that's my encouragement this week. May we each find a way to incorporate Sabbath into our life. All right. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time on The In-Between.
Thanks so much again for watching and listening to today's episode. I can't wait to hear about how you begin to incorporate the Sabbath into your life. And I'm really excited about the rest of this month. I have 2 interviews coming up the next 2 weeks. One where we really talk about nutrition, and the other one where we talk about kind of pastoring our own soul, taking care of ourselves. It's going to be good. Invite your friends, and if you want to get more links or information about the episode today, be sure to head on over to the blog at thein-between.com. And if you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe to YouTube or iTunes. That's the fastest way to know when a new episode is up. All right, we'll see you next week.